Hello there everybody, welcome back to Good Game of Fun. I'm the Hat Person, and here's my review for Semispheres on PS Vita. I do apologize for the change in setup. This is usually not the way that I do things. I'm kind of doing this at the last moment. My schedule's been crazy recently, but you're still gonna get a review out of me, so here we go. So the short version of my review goes like this. Semispheres is a pretty good game. It is simple, but it gets to the point very quickly. It does the puzzle game very well without much getting into the way. Even though it's a little bit rough around the edges, like it's some college student's final exam for a class or something, it still holds a lot of very interesting concepts, and it kept my attention for a long while, especially when I could just carry it around and play it wherever I go on PlayStation Vita. It works well, is really fun, and if you're looking for a good game, a good small little puzzle game to play on Vita, I recommend this one. It's pretty alright. And now the long version of the review goes like this. Sometimes the small things in life are just as enjoyable as the bigger ones. We tend to forget that when we always expect AAA experiences out of games when smaller but genuine titles fly over our heads. That's what I think about it when playing Semispheres, a small puzzle game for PS Vita that gets the job done and keeping me hooked on my Vita without letting go, despite its blemishes. Semispheres lets you play as a pair of two colored spheres, each controlled by an analog stick. Essentially, you go through every level trying to solve two different puzzles at once with both spheres. You have to go from point A to B in every level, but there's always some mind-bending obstacle getting in the way. Of course, there will quickly come a time where one puzzle has to interact with the other in order for both to be solved. It is at this point where the puzzles start to get a lot more complex and fun, introducing a bunch of new mechanics like portals, sound waves, and teleportations. So playing this game kind of reminded me of how some people would jokingly play Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, in the way that, you know, every character was controlled by the analog stick, right? So I've seen some like co-op Let's Plays of Brothers, where one person is holding one half of the controller, and then the second person the second half. I can kind of see that happening, where people are sort of helping each other out. It is a bit of a shame that there's no multiplayer in this game. This is a single-player Vita game only, so I think multiplayer would have come a long way for this sort of thing. But in a way, it's kind of good that it's only single-player, because the mind-bending comes out of the game kind of confusing you. We're like, oh, now we moved this ball to the opposite side, but it's still being controlled by the same analog stick, so your mind kind of like flips backwards and like, what are you doing? Like, your mind kind of has to readjust to all these things. There's also little portals that you can lay about on the entire level, where if you go inside the portal, then you obviously end up on the other side, and so you can help the other side of the puzzle so you can progress, and like it gets it's very confusing to describe it, but seeing it in action, you immediately get it, and even then you still get very confused. It's really fun trying to really figure out all of the little mechanics that they shove in there so you can keep progressing. Having two different puzzles on both sides of the screen is a very simple concept that quickly gets turned on its head the deeper you delve into a new set of levels, all of which contain short panels of storytelling featuring a boy and his robot friend. You'll see these panels often, for there are only a handful of levels per world, and none of them are too hard to figure out. If you take the time to actually comprehend the new mechanics that are laid out for you at the start, the difficulty curve becomes very natural. Brute forcing these puzzles won't do much to help you. I don't know about you, but in my personal experience, I was blowing through most of the puzzles because I was paying attention to all of the new things that they kept introducing. So there's a reason for why, oh, okay, I can put a portal here, but my other guy doesn't have access to that. You know, you really have to take a look at your surroundings and realize that there's a reason for why the levels are set up the way that they are. Sometimes you might think, oh, well, this one is too empty, or this part of the level is way too easy. Like my little sphere ball guy can like just traverse the entirety of the level and just walk towards the end. But maybe you need all that mobility to help the sphere on the other side to do other stuff through the portals and all that kind of stuff. Some people might feel the necessity of just brute forcing these levels, but I really don't recommend it. I feel like you need to understand what the mechanics are, what you can do with it and what you can't do with it, and just kind of play around and think outside the box a little bit before you really start to delve deep into actually solving the puzzles, because after that, the difficulty spike won't really feel like a spike. It'll feel like a very soft hill. It's gonna feel very natural. This game kind of reminds me of Portal a little bit, where they introduce like a small little concept, and then as you kind of stare and think of the puzzle, you kind of get that aha moment, where like, oh, I figured it out, and then it all falls into place and you feel awesome. So one of the best examples of this is the mechanic of dying. So dying has no consequence other than resetting you to the beginning of the level. And so at the beginning is going to seem annoying, like, you know, I died, I gotta start all over, I made a mistake. But there will eventually come some puzzles where dying is actually a requirement. You're actually going to have to reset yourself to the beginning to be able to pull off different moves that will allow you to solve the puzzle. The most fun that I had in this game is realizing that, because I had made a mistake unintentionally. I said like, I screwed it up, but then when I made that mistake and I saw, the enemies kind of moving in a different pattern, or realizing that I had access to this other thing now, it's like, oh, okay, so like dying is like a trick that I can do to solve puzzles. Like, oh, that's really cool. I didn't even think of that until I had done that mistake. Speaking of mistakes, some of the criticisms I would like to give to this game involve the production value of it all. For one, the frame rate completely tanks whenever I try to make any big moves with both spheres at once. Considering how little action you see on screen, I would expect the overall experience to be a lot smoother. Transitions between levels are also non-existent, with only an abrupt cut to the hub world. I certainly feel there could have been more done to make the levels flow from one to the other in a much smoother fashion. Another thing I noticed was small moments of freezing during occasions that don't involve simple moving, which are even more noticeable when blown up on a television through a PlayStation TV. One last thing would be the music and visuals, which pretty much involves the same sleep-inducing drone throughout with no variety in color at all. I would have liked to see the different worlds in the game feature different color palettes, with maybe a new song to come with it. As it currently stands, if you've seen one level, you've seen all of them, which feels like a wasted potential to me. In terms of polishing, it certainly feels a tad unfinished, but the gameplay certainly makes up for all the flaws. Overall, Semispheres is an average but entertaining game that does the puzzle part pretty well, but falls short on everything else. All of the positive points rest almost entirely on the gameplay, which completely rescues the basic and unpolished production value. The frame rate, music, visuals, and even the menus and the translations need a lot of work. However, this doesn't change the fact that I was very invested in beating all the puzzles and seeing how the seemingly unrelated story turns out. If you want something interesting to play on your Vita, then I say you give this a shot. Maybe with enough support, we'll see a sequel that improves upon what it has. Before I leave, I want to give a special thanks to East Asia Soft, which is the publisher that sent me the review code to be able to play this game and write this review on time on the day of release. So thank you very much for your support.